Hi everyone, Kendall here, and welcome to week 4 of our continuing Brackman mystery block series. This week's video is a little bit longer, and you'll find out why as we progress through. A few things I wanted to touch on before we started. As most of you may or may not be aware, I was making a little 9-inch version of the previous blocks. And I was hoping to continue those with this new series. However, I ran out of the background fabric and had to order it from my wholesaler, and I'm waiting on that to arrive, which is why my little 9-inch blocks this time is being made in the matching fabrics to there. But I do still have the little top waiting patiently for that background fabric to arrive. Okay, so with all that being said, let's get on with this week's video. Brackman block 1628 is actually unknown and is simply from a quilt in the 1920s. While this is not a rejected block, as I will be showing you how to make it, because the triangle in a square block is a bit fussy, and to keep things simple, I will make a second draw for this week which we will focus on, and then I will touch briefly on how you would make this unknown block. So let's spin that wheel again. Brackman ID 1728 gives us a block that was known by quite a few different names, including Kitty Corner, Puss in the Corner, and Tic Tac Toe. This was a block created by Ruth Finlay, and it appeared in a book that was titled Old Patchwork and the Women Who Made Them, which was published by J.P. Lippincott of Philadelphia in 1929. This book was reprinted by EPM Publications of McLean, Virginia in 1992. And so we begin where we begin every week, with all of our pieces cut out as per the cutting sheet that will be supplied for you down in the link in the description below, and over at my Facebook group, Kendall's Quilting Corner, also linked in the description box below. If you haven't joined already, come join the fun over there on Facebook. So we're going to start by making the 4 units that are the bar units, and for that we need our B strips and our E rectangles, and we're just simply going to sew a B rectangle on each side of our E rectangle, and then we'll press those in towards the darker of the 2 fabrics. With those units now made, all we have left to do is create our 4 square in a square blocks. And I know some people struggle with these, but it is just a sew and flip on each corner. And, you know, if you don't get your sew and flip exact, you can make up for that in your seam allowance. I think we all tend to stress a little bit too much when things don't come out perfect the first time. However, whenever I use my folded corner clipper tool, I'm satisfied with the results, however that may be. So to use the folded corner clipper tool, we simply place our smaller square on top of our larger square. We line up the markings, in this instance that is 2.5 inches, and we slice away that corner before we take it to the machine and we stitch our 1/4 inch. In a lot of my previous videos, I've shown you a lot of different methods to create the sew and flips, and my preferred and number one way that I always do them is with the folded corner clipper tool. But sometimes even with this tool, I don't actually use those markings that are on there. I just find that 1/4 inch diagonal and make sure that I do have that bottom corner lined up, and I slice it away. And I do actually find that I get higher accuracy when I do it this way, because I know that that stitching line will be exactly where I need it to be, because I'm very happy with my 1/4 inch at my machine. So as I said, we do need to create 4 of these so we can get them ready 2 at a time on opposing corners. If you don't have the folded corner clipper tool though, I don't know why not. You can just use a standard quilting ruler that has that 1/4 inch mark, and we do exactly the same thing that we did in that last step. We just line that 1/4 inch mark up diagonally from corner to corner on our piece before slicing those 2 layers away, and once again taking that to the machine to stitch our 1/4 inch. If you don't have that little ruler that I just used, which is a 1x12 from Creative Grids, but you do have a 6.5 by 12.5, the 45-degree lines on that ruler come in really handy for doing this. It's just a matter of lining up a few things and making sure everything's where it needs to be. So locate where your 45-degree lines cross over, and you'll notice there's a little triangle out to the side. Line up one of those 45-degree lines along the bottom of your smaller square, and the dissecting one that goes from top to bottom along the edge of your larger square. This will leave that little triangle from where they cross over out on the edge, and it perfectly places your 1/4 inch mark from corner to corner. So even if you don't have the folded corner clipper tool, there are many different ways you can do these sew and flips, including, and I say gasp, the traditional method by drawing a line and, you know, all of that jazz. Anyway, I'm going to get all of these corner units done, and once we have these sew and flips, we will press out towards our background square corner, and I'll get all these done and I'll be back with you. If only we could actually sew that fast, wouldn't that be fantastic? Anyway, through the power of television and video editing, I now have all 4 of those units done, and we have all of the pieces that we need to make up this week's block. So we're going to pull in our last remaining fabric that we haven't touched yet, being our A square, and that goes in the middle. We're then going to line up our bar units around that in a cross-like fashion, making sure to get the correct orientation. So the top and bottom go horizontally and the left and right go vertically. We then just need to place each of our 4 square in a square units in those corners, and then we commence our 9-patch construction by sewing all of our vertical seams and then our horizontal seams. For this one, our pressing will be a little bit different in that on the top and the bottom row, we normally press out towards the corners. But to reduce the bulk and help out where those square in a square units create their point, we'll press in towards the bar unit on the top and the bottom, and out towards the bar units on that middle row. This will mean when we come to do our horizontal stitching that our intersections will all nest nicely. After completing our first horizontal seam, and for the second one, once we get to it, we will press in towards the center of the block, as that will leave our points once again from our square inner square corners in the seam allowance, as opposed to trying to press against that. So we'll get this one pressed into place, we'll do our final horizontal seam, press that one also towards the middle, and this block for this week is done. But stay tuned, because as I said, I will run you through how to make the first one that was spun up. Okay, so as I said, I decided not to actually reject this block, but give you an option for this week, as those triangle inner square blocks can be a little bit tricky. There are very many specialty rulers on the market to help you with the triangle inner square blocks, and also half rectangle triangles. The tool is almost the same. However, we can piece these triangle inner square units manually, and I must give a shout out and a thank you to Holly Ann Knight at String and Story for her wonderful tutorial, which I am following here to show you, because I needed to know if it was possible to do them using a manual method. And I wasn't sure how to do that except for using AccuQuilt, which isn't really a manual method. So thank you very much, Holly Ann Knight, and let's get into it. Okay, so to make this method, you do need to make them two at a time, and that is because we need a left and a right of our print fabric in this case to create those star legs, or the half rectangle triangle part of our triangle in a square. And the fabric calculations are quite simple, and I'll pop that on the screen now. So we need for the large rectangle, the large triangle which goes in the middle, which isn't an equilateral triangle, it actually comes to an angle of about 63 degrees. So we can't use our 60-degree triangle ruler for those. But what we need to do is take our unfinished size for this large triangle, which in my instance will be the background fabric. We take our unfinished size and we add ½ an inch to that. So for this 12-inch block, I need a 4.5 inch unit. So 4.5 inches plus ½ an inch gives me 5 inches. Now for the complete quilt, I do need to have 4 of those. So I am just going to cut those now. So there we have our 4 squares that we need of our fabric that will make the large triangle. So the triangle that will be in the square, and once again that is the unfinished measurement plus ½ an inch. So our unfinished measurement for the unit was 4.5, so I've cut 5-inch squares. Now for the fabric that will make up the half rectangle triangles, it is a little bit more complicated. Well, not really, in that we take our unfinished unit size once again of 4.5 and we divide that by 2. So that gives us 2 1/4. We then add 1 inch to that, which gives us 3 1/4. So the units that we need to cut for our half rectangle triangles is 3 1/4 on the short side, and for our long side we need our unfinished size plus ½ an inch. So it's 3 1/4 by 5, and I need 4 of those for my blocks. So I am going to start with a rectangle of 6.5 by 5, I'm cutting towards myself. Not such a good idea, but I did it now. So 6.5 by 5. And then I'll cut that in half to give me the 3.25 by 5. Okay, so once again, we'll just go over that. For the fabric that becomes the triangle that is in the square, you have the unfinished size plus 1/2 inch. In our instance, for a 4.5 inch unfinished unit, we needed a 5-inch square. For the fabric that will make up the half rectangle triangles, on the long side you have the same measurement as your square, so unfinished plus 1/2 inch, and for the short side we take the unfinished size and we divide that by 2, and then we add 1 inch. So in our example, for 4.5 inches, divide that by 2, you get 2.25 inches. When you add 1 to that 2.25 inch, you get 3.25, and they are all the pieces that we need. Now, because I need 4 of these, we are cutting 4 each of those fabrics, and for this method there is a little bit of waste, and we'll get onto that now. So the first thing we need to do is take our 5-inch squares here, and we need to put a mark halfway along one of the edges. So at the 2.5 inch mark on all 4 of these. Next, we're going to take our rectangles that we cut to size just before, and we need to place a mark that is 1/2 inch in from the edge on the top right hand corner and the bottom left hand corner. So you will see me do that in just a moment. And these marks indicate where we will cut these in half to give us our half rectangle triangles. So as you saw there, we just use those marks as a place to line up our ruler to slice that rectangle in half, and by leaving our fabrics either right side or wrong side together, we get a left and a right size piece. So we need to take one each of those, and what we need to do, and this feels a bit strange, but trust the process, is line that top point up that you see me doing here with that center mark that we drew on our large square earlier. You then make sure that that bottom corner is lined up with the edge of the fabric. We're not looking at leaving a 1/4 inch gap or anything here. We're just lining those up point to point, and then we'll take that to the machine and we will stitch our 1/4 inch seam. With that now done, we can trim away that excess fabric, but I'm just going to fold this over to show you that it's not like a sew and flip, and these edges are not supposed to line up. So if you get to that point and you have a little bit of a freak out, don't worry about it. It is not supposed to line up, but again, I say trust the process. So now that I've shown you that, we just need to trim away that back layer, and then we'll press that into place before repeating exactly the same thing for the left-hand side. Now, as with most methods of constructing any kind of unit or quilt block, these do need to be trimmed down. Now, a few things to remember here. We need a 1/2 inch above that peak. We know the width of our unfinished block is 4.5, so we need the 2.25 inch mark to go in the center there, making sure that we have 1/4 inch above that peak. You can use the base of that triangle unit to give you a reference for a straight line, to make sure that your ruler has been lined up straight and accurate before trimming away the first 2 sides. You can then just rotate this around, line up the 4.5 inch marks on those freshly cut sides, have a quick check to make sure that it's still, the 2.25 inch mark is in the middle, and slice away the final 2 sides. And we have, in my instance, not perfect triangle inner squares, but it'll all come out in the wash once we sew these into the block. And that is how we create these triangle inner square units without the specialty rulers. I will fast forward through the rest of the construction of this block, which does include 1/2 square triangles and 1/4 square triangles, which we have covered in previous videos and will cover again in future videos. I just really wanted to focus on how to make these triangle inner square units. And of course, for the block, I'm now going to continue through and make the remaining 3 units that I need. The easiest way for me to make this block is by using my Quilt, and in this instance my Go Me. And for that we need quite a few shapes to make up this, including from the mix and match cube and the companion set angles. So from the mix and match cube you would need shapes 3 and 4, and from the companion set angles you need 13 and 14. Now 3 and 4 make the 1/2 square triangles for the corner, and the 1/4 square triangle in the center of the block, and 13 and 14 make the triangle inner square units. Remembering all of my tips from previous videos, when using your Quilt, always make sure that the length of grain is running perpendicular to your rollers, and that way the fabric is less likely to stretch and you get a more accurate cut. Also, whenever I am piecing with my Quilt, I do press my seams open, and one of you asked in the group, but I couldn't find it, why that is. I find that Quilt shapes are cut at a very scant 1/4 inch. I don't play around with any of that nonsense, but because I know that, by pressing the seams open, there is no take up of the cloth or a little bit of bulk created by just pressing to one side, which actually takes away a little bit of your fabric. And so when I use AccuQuilt, I do press my seams open, and that sort of just alleviates that. So this block just goes together. First of all, we have to make all of the individual units using the wonderfully engineered corners from our AccuQuilt, and just simply create the units and then sew this block together in that 9-patch fashion. The one thing that you do need to note is that the shapes that I'm doing now, I'm not sure if that's 13 or 14, are directional. So you do need to have your fabric with right sides facing or wrong sides facing to get a left and a right. If you put all of your fabric in with the right side up, you will only get one side. So because we need a left and a right, you do need to fan fold that fabric to get both of the pieces required, as the shape in and of itself will only cut one side. So just make note of that. So I'm going to start by lining up all of those pieces, creating my units and sewing the block together. So enjoy that process. So if you wanted to know what the first block looked like on repeat, here it is here, and again it would lend itself to being very scrappy. You can just add some sashing and cornerstones to separate those blocks out and make the top easier to piece. Now for our second block, we get quite a stunning result when we have that on repeat, and it gives the illusion of curves. So I think that would make a fantastic quilt, but as always, here is what that would look like separated by some sashing and cornerstones. So what do we think of the choice of 2 blocks? I am aware that from a feedback and a poll that I did, that a few of you prefer to have easier blocks to do, and I figured that I just really loved the look of those triangle in a square, which you saw me make. I really do love this block. So even though in the video I originally made the cat's cradle tic-tac-toe, which I probably will use in the quilt, I went ahead and made a larger version also, which came second. I had all the video completely recorded and done and edited, and then I'm like, I'm going to re-record that and make the 12-inch version of the unknown block. So as always, thanks for joining me again this week, folks. And if you haven't done so already, I'd love for you to like the video, share it with a friend that you think may be interested. Leave me a comment down below about how your day is going and how you're progressing with your work. Jump on over to Facebook, join my Facebook community, Kendall's Quilting Corner. I'll put a link in the description box below. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, but most importantly, when you do subscribe, tickle that little bell icon and you will be notified of all my upcoming releases and won't miss a thing. I'll see you all again real soon. Bye for now.